So this is building a better Unity. The idea here is we have various people from the product team. We're going to talk you through how this is sort of an evolutionary phase for us as we go forward building Unity. We have people from product management, support, evangelism, engineering, community, as well as user experience. And yeah, Will was supposed to say that was a sick burn, but all right, catch up. So we'll cut into it and basically say, you know, why are we here? And each person will go down and sort of describe sort of what their role is.
Are you going to start?
Sure. So I'm Shawn McClelland. I'm the user experience lead at Unity. I'm basically here to engage with as many people as possible and try to introduce the customer problems and needs into the development cycle. So a lot of my work goes into talking with customers, figuring out what the problems are, and delivering that back to the team and working with engineering and others to identify what we need to do.
Cool, I'm Will Goldstone. I'm part of the product management team. I deal with a lot of different things around the area of onboarding new users. So I'm overseeing things like training and parts of the website, parts of the product itself, and anything that's potentially causing people to kind of bounce off Unity and not want to carry on learning it or carry on working with it.
And I'm Sara, and I'm from the community team. And what I do is basically, I strengthen the relationships between our developers at Unity and the developers in the community, which is all of you, and also working on our forum and answer sites, and soon also the feedback site. So basically, also gathering data on product feedback, relaying it back to Will's team and Shawn's team. And yeah, just here checking in with developers.
I'm Tuesday Smith. I'm a services support engineer. Mostly answer questions about Collaborate and Cloud Build under the Unity Teams umbrella. And I communicate with everybody through forums and Zendesk tickets as well. So I have a direct line usually with everybody, and I also sit with a lot of the dev teams. So I get a lot of feature requests and feedback that I'm submitting directly to the teams by actually walking up to their desks and telling them. So.
My name's Tim. I'm a graphics programmer on one of the graphics teams at Unity. My main role is essentially running projects, getting feedback from users from these projects, and figuring out how to integrate them into the products that we're developing. This is both on the technical and non-technical side of these features. So I take a bit of the usability feedback, and I work with the UX team we have, as well as taking the technical requirements and the technical requests that people are making and bring them into the product.
I'm Andy. I've been traveling with Unity for about 4 years in evangelism. And I've visited everyone from random developer in their basement making a game, hoping it's going to be amazing, to the biggest companies out there making games with Unity. And I've gone to show them what Unity is, what it can do, what we're working on, try and fix their problems, and then try and loop that back into Unity in some way, or kind of show Unity what people are working on. I've probably met a whole bunch of you at some point. Yeah.
Cool. So now that we've introed everything, we're going to run through sort of how each person sort of engages and listens to customer feedback and how we process it. I'm going to pass it down to Will on that.
Sure. Okay, so obviously there's a bunch of different ways that we listen to customers and to various members of the community. Lots of our different teams like field engineering, support, community do actual on-site visits, sales team go with them as well. And we talk to people about their direct specific problems, or we talk about whether there are problems with adopting Unity as a platform generally. Obviously there's the community forums, which Sara and her team look after. The feedback board, did you want to talk a bit about feedback and where that's going, or not?
The new feedback board?
Yeah.
Well, the internal one or the feedback site? Because we have the site, yeah. So y'all may be familiar with the feedback site. It's a little bit of, wish list, feature requests, but also just in general how we can improve certain areas within our product. We are currently redesigning it together with Will's team, and to figure out how we internally can funnel the requests that we get, because there is a lot, and there obviously has to be prioritization being done, but also how we can communicate back what the status is on everything. And so, yeah, we're currently still in the mock-up stage of this and talking about it internally, but we do want to listen in. If any of you have advice on how we can improve that site, please catch me afterwards because, yeah, we're redesigning it right now.
Cool. Zendesk, so Tuesday, that's more your area, right?
Yeah, so some of you might be familiar with the knowledge base if you've ever gone in to ask questions, particularly about services. And we actually use Zendesk as our tool for support ticketing. So if you have support and you go in and like for Collaborate, everybody's able to get into that. So we're able to go into those tickets and actually specifically handle them like they're all seen by human eyes because there's only 2 of us on my team, so we're going to see it. And we're able to actually communicate directly with the development teams if there's any kind of feature requests or specific trending problems or any kind of specific feedback that didn't make it onto the site. We're able to see that, we're able to add it, we're able to communicate it directly to those teams. So it's actually a really good avenue. If you have feature requests as well or any kind of feedback, you can send any angry or happy comments to me as well. So.
Cool. And then, of course, social media. We talk to people on Twitter all the time, Facebook, we have groups, and we have all kinds of other different avenues of receiving data from people. And, of course, user research. So, Shawn, it's probably best for you to speak to that, right?
Yeah, so a lot of our interactions with customers come through user research. So we have a new user research portal that's actually on the main page of the website. If you go into the community section, you can sign up for user research, and the user experience team reaches out to you and sets up a date and a time, and we can go over new features and things that we're trying to gauge are important to users. So definitely take a look at that.
Cool, and of course, events like this. You know, we've spent the past 2-3 days talking to all of you about how you feel about Unity, what you'd like to see, and that's exactly what this session is all about, is about you talking to us. So we said we'd set aside 10 or 15 minutes to get our part out of the way, and I think we're nearly done slide-wise. What have we got next? Okay. So this is the part where you ask us anything you want to. We know not everybody's comfortable with coming up and speaking on the mic, so we thought we would go to Twitter. So if you guys are ready on the tweets, you can tweet Babu, Building a Better Unity, and ask us a question. You may also see tweets about Bollywood star Babu. Didn't anticipate it when I wrote the hashtag, but there we go. So ask us anything. Like I say, we've got product-related people, you've got evangelism, you've got support. You can ask us anything you want. Don't all rush to the mic, because that would be awkward, but at the same time, do have a sense of expediency if you have any kind of question. Nothing? So what we're taking away from this, bear in mind, is that Unity and its services and platform is perfect. So if you don't agree with that statement, sit or stand.
Everybody sit.
Wow, we're doing really well.
Okay, cool. That's lunch.
Do you want to, Shawn?
Shall we?
So I guess one thing to talk about is when we talk about engaging with our users, we're moving towards a model where we're trying to be more open and sharing with our community. We're trying not to wait until the last minute until we show you something in, say, a beta, but trying to get out and show you early designs and early prototypes. So an example that you see out in the wild right now is things like the post-processing stack, the scriptable render pipeline, and recently at the roadmap, you heard that we're working on prefab workflow improvements, and we have an actual prototype here that we're showing in the experts booth as a way of engaging people more. We need feedback earlier on in the process to understand if we're solving the right problems. Do you want to talk a bit about the render pipeline process?
Yeah. So what we've started doing recently, about 2 years ago internally, we came up with a new way of developing Unity, essentially. And we decided that what we were going to do is we were going to make a very tight, well-designed core product, essentially. And then everything that we develop at Unity will become modules that live on top of this. If you were at the roadmap session yesterday, you would have seen Joachim talking about the package manager and a few other projects we have going on that is making this a reality. But what we've started to do now is we are actually shipping projects that are following this method. The first big one we shipped was the UI system a few years ago. This came very early on in the process, so it's not the most isolated module, but it's getting there now. And in the graphics area, we have the post-processing stack and the new scriptable render pipelines. The way we're developing these projects is completely open on GitHub. You can see all of the changes and the commits we're doing to these projects as we develop them. And this allows us to develop in an open way, which is something we're really a big fan of. And it also allows you to see what we're doing early and provide feedback. This also has other advantages for both you and us. One of the big problems that we have with Unity is sometimes there'll be a core bug and it may take a few weeks for us to get a bug fix out to you as the user. When we're developing these projects in a module or in an open way, it's possible for you to take this code and make any changes you need yourself. So you can either improve a system or bug fix a system. And we're also happy to take most of these changes back into the core product, so long as they align with the vision we have for that feature. Some good examples of this with the post-processing stack that we have. Right now, it's available. We're very active with the users. We use GitHub there for managing both the bugs and the feature requests. We have the documentation for the feature there as well. And as time goes on, we're bringing that into the product using the package manager system, but we'll still be developing it in an open way. So if you want to contribute and see what we're doing there, it's a really great place to check it out. I'd imagine that as time moves on, more and more of the features we're developing at Unity will be going through this system, and it's something that is pretty important to us and pretty important to you. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of this, and this is the way we're heading with our product development direction. One of the other parts is it also allows us to increase our development velocity. We can ship fixes and releases of these features outside of the main Unity release cycle. So for example, in the post-processing stack, a few weeks ago we discovered a rather nasty bug on Android, and we were able to fix it the next day and have a fix out to everyone who needed it, rather than having them wait 2 to 3 weeks for the next beta release.
Yeah, the core message that we're trying to send here is being more open and being more involved, right? Working with you to develop these things. As Sara mentioned earlier, we have a feedback board. We know it's a bit problematic, and so we're trying to approach it from a standpoint of making it more usable, more friendly, and making it so that your votes actually matter. By the same token, as Tim said, we're engaging with people on the forums, so working with Sara to raise the forum awareness, have designers and developers in the forums and actually talking people through problems. So if you're ever on the forums and you're trying to figure out, where to go, just drop a line and sort of say, hey, I have this problem, or I need this, and Sara's team notifies us, and we can get in there and actively work together.
Yeah, one of the other things that I think this new way of developing improves things for us and for you is that right now the feedback board is very coarse-grained. It's very much like, I want feature X in Unity, or I want feature Y. Whereas when we have this more open development model with modules, it allows people to go directly to the hub where the developers are working and request an improvement or a small feature to a certain area, rather than requesting a holistic feature. So it allows us to separate out big feature requests that would come on the features board compared to little improvements or features requests to a module that we're already shipping. And it's a much handier way for us to manage this as well. And you get much closer to the developers working on those projects.
But also each preview, as we call it, they also get their own sub-forum in the forums. And typically the team that's responsible for that specific part is in there, either if it's bug related, but also, it is to learn. Sometimes we create a sub-forum before we even release a preview, just to get some kind of feedback and understanding of what people actually need from this and how can we design it. So it's a good tip to be engaged there, because that will be direct connection to the developers.
And that's kind of similar as well with the services forums, which are already a bit segmented for like ads and analytics, IAP, Collaborate, Cloud Build. These are good places to get involved as well, because my team is looking at those forums directly pretty much all the time. And we have a direct line with the development teams as well, and we take the feedback and everything we get in there very seriously.
And also, to jump on the events a little bit, there are typically user groups in most larger or bigger cities, and we try to send people from Unity there as well. but it's also a great way to, just like the Unity forums is a great way to get support from other community members. So our user groups, the talks are usually really great. People show their games. There's workshops. For example, there are many people at Unity that make games as well. I'm a game developer, and Andy's a game developer, and we also go to game jams. Recently, we were at Nordic Game Jam, which is pretty sweet. I teach at Coder Dojo, so I'm teaching kids between 9 and 14 how to learn how to script in C#. So just by doing that, we also get to interact with people through working using Unity. And so we also run into things, and we tell the teams, for example, if I run into, I make 2D games, for example, and I go directly to our 2D physics guy when I run into an issue or don't understand anything. So even like dog fooding is a large part of how we kind of funnel feedback.
So is it worth talking a little bit about design as well, how we're changing UI elements and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the core things that we're building up in Unity is the design team. Design is such a core part of the product, and the focus is really collaborating with product management, community, evangelism, and engineering to have a more holistic view of the product. So in design, what we often try and do is narrow in on the problem. So if you see a designer or you see someone from the design team in the forums, often what we're asking is, what problems do you have? What are the things that keep you up at night? What are the things that we're just not doing right? And again, the microphone is open here, so if we do have stuff that you feel like burning questions to raise, please, by all means. But we take that back. We work with Will's team, we work with Tim, we work with Sara to understand what the impact is on the product and how we can push that forward. Part of that is coming up with trends, coming up with designs. A big part right now is coming up with a good set of design principles so that when we look 10 years out at Unity, what are some really good fundamental principles that we need to have, around consistency, feedback, how we message things to users. These are really important. The more complex the product gets, the more important it is to have a good set of guiding principles so that we're consistent all the way through.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to add, kind of jumping off of design, is something that we've been working on for a while is underlying reworking of the editor. So that's where I was kind of going with the design thing, was that for years, the editor's been based on something that we call IM GUI, immediate mode GUI, and it's slowly being rewritten under the hood with a retain mode GUI that we call UI elements. So UI elements is going to allow you to create editor windows, panels, tools, anything you want to, far more easy than when you were using the old IM GUI. So basically, it takes a model that's kind of similar to HTML and CSS style. So you'll see something called USS, which is Unity Style Sheets. And basically, what this allows you to do is rapidly iterate on a window, separating the kind of format and function in the same way that web design does. So hopefully, it's going to be a real game changer for how we develop the tools and how we can, go on to then redesign everything to make it a lot more user-friendly and a better experience. But it'll also be far quicker for you to make tools. We had a little play with it at Hack Week a few weeks ago, and we're able to mock up some really simple tools for navigating things inside the scene view super easily. So that's coming, I think that's dropping 2017 too, is that right?
The experimental APIs are in 2017-1 and 2017.
Right. So it's slowly rolling out over the next sort of 6 months or so, where you'll see access to that. And then eventually what we want to do with that is take those tools and also apply them to the game side UI as well, which I'm not sure whether I can announce that now, but I've just done it, which is great. So slowly we're working up on the editor UI side of things, and then also on the game side as well. And some of you will have seen that we brought into the kind of Unity family TextMesh Pro recently, and Stefan, who creates that product, is working on bringing in that kind of functionality and all of his kind of research on signed distance field into the editor UI, and thinking about how we can improve that, make it more responsive, and make it generally a better high-def, cooler experience. So are there any questions? Is there anyone who hates part of their life day to day using Unity?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy, like, if anyone just wants to come up and say something they really like about Unity or something they really hate and wish would look into and investigate, this is a perfect forum for that. We're happy to have a discussion about that now as well.
I have a question. Do we have any artists in the audience? Yeah?
Yeah.
We've got two. So why don't you have a question? Because I know for a fact your life's not easy in Unity. It's lovely. Okay. Okay. So are there any artists who don't lie?
No, but we are taking a big initiative now, working with our artist tools, and even here at Unite, we've organized some artist roundtables to just like sit down with people and discuss what works for you, what doesn't, what do you expect, or how do you expect this to behave? Like, how can we improve different areas? I mean, like my background is more in programming, but I'm also an artist myself. So for me, this is like a super important part of our like moving forward. And also, if you saw the keynote yesterday, we have this amazing demo team in Stockholm who made the forest prototype demo for the keynote, not yesterday. And they're also like very art focused and really want to make everything just look as beautiful as it can.
Yeah, I think generally what I end up talking to a lot of people about is like, where is Unity going with all of the stuff that we do? And I think a good answer to that is that we want to be as inclusive as we can and make teams as productive as possible. So that sounds kind of vague, but you know, we're very, very aware that for artists, animators, game designers, narrative designers, all these people don't have really any access to Unity without buying certain very specific tailored tools to their role. So, you know, people buy Playmaker, people buy you know, Text Mesh Pro for better text. People buy Twine and Ink, Shader Forge, all of these kind of things, you know, that we see are immensely popular. And we think as a, you know, as a team that wants to build a well-rounded tool, that you should have access to those things out of the box. So we're slowly kind of, you know, getting all of our things in a row to figure out how best we do that. It's like, could we just drop a, you know, straightforward visual scripting tool into Unity? Yeah. And are we working on visual scripting? 100%. Will it be exactly like Playmaker? Probably not. Will it be like UScript? Don't know. You know, there's all these kind of things where we look at what you already use today, because it's not like people come to Unity and say, there's no visual shader editor. Well, I can't do anything then. They look at the asset store and they go there, and that's why it's a useful, you know, thing for you to have access to. But generally speaking, we want everyone to have a kind of like a baseline of accessibility in the product. So that's why you'll see us rolling out things like Timeline, like Cinemachine, like visual scripting, like world building. You know, so we're ramping up on teams to address all of these problems, and we know that they are big problems because we know that, you know, people feel like second-class citizens when they don't have those features. You know, someone who's coming in as a narrative designer or someone who's coming in as a game designer has to use tools that aren't fully integrated in the sense that they're not built-in features or they're not packages. And you know, that's all something that we're really working on more as of the past like 18 months or so, really ramping up, adding those teams. So when you saw in the keynote, we had 177 core engineers, we now have 400 core engineers. You know, this is where those kind of attentions go. It's to making Unity into a product that will allow us to build those tools in a really efficient way.
Are there any tools that you feel like are obviously hurting your day-to-day workflows by us not having? Feel free to just yell out.
Or tools that we already ship that suck, that do hurt your day-to-day workflow. Yeah. Okay, so there's a guy there who got slightly closer to the mic than before. Okay. Big round of applause for the first question. I'm as relieved as you are.
Yeah, I'm so stressed right now. Anyway, is there any plans like to add support for generic fields and interface fields to be able to see them in this picture? Like, when I program, I want my code to follow the OCP rule, open close principle, or what is it called? I don't know. Like, to be able to expose interface fields and just drag motor behavior scripts that implements these interfaces. So I can just change the references dynamically during gameplay or runtime and stuff.
So basically some form of dependency injection for your types?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Unity out of the box works with a number of dependency injection frameworks, just because it's built off C# and Mono. But we don't have any plans currently to have that level of integration in the inspector. Did you see Joachim's talk yesterday on the C# job system that we're working on? No. So we're working on a new sort of way to do large-scale gameplay code built on top of an entity component framework. And essentially what this does is it uses a form of code dependency injection to allow you to go run large simulations on a large number of objects. And in terms of the implementation, we actually take care of a lot of that behind the scenes. So you're coding in a very nice sandbox, but it's very different to how you work now. So I would recommend checking out that presentation when it becomes available. It's a form of entity control framework that uses some dependency injection, and it's pretty nice to look at.
Why not add, let's say, support for other collection types, like other than lists, dictionaries and stuff?
Yeah, so that's always a good question. Mostly it's just because it's work that we haven't gotten around to doing. I believe I've seen a pull request somewhere for adding dictionary support into the serialization type. Yeah, it's just it takes time to do, and there's always something slightly more important. But yeah, we should add them. We should have the full support.
Unity events, the property field, the fields support only, let's say, methods that receive single argument. So is there any plans, other plans to add support for methods with multiple arguments?
So Unity events can take parameters up to 4 arguments.
Yeah, but let's say when you have a button, a click event, you want to add methods.
So that's not a problem with the Unity events. That's actually just the callback we have for the button itself. You can extend the button class that we have and change the callback to take as many arguments as you'd like.
For you, friend over?
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Hi guys. This is kind of like a 2-tier question. So to start off with, it's I generally written mobile, and basically recently had this issue where, specifically on Android, we've moved up from 5.3.3 up to 5.3.5, and basically it's about audio focus, and you guys are taking control of essentially audio focus for Android, and it creates an issue with our client wants a very specific behavior, and it's very hard to get that because I just don't know what is going on under the hood and where I should put the Java code and whatnot, specifically on Android.
Yep.
So I'm essentially wondering, basically, is there any chance of opening up that sort of the native kind of chunks of code, if you see what I mean, to add your own sort of stuff and put it places, code in its own places and whatnot?
So I'm not an Android expert, so I can't give you an exact answer to that. But if this has changed since between 5.3 and 5.5, and you can't do something now that you used to be able to do, we consider that a code functional regression. And by that it means it's a very high important issue for us, because if you could do something in a release and now we stop you from doing that, that's a bug, and it's a pretty serious bug because we'll break users' projects. So the 2 things I'd recommend now, if that is the case, raise a bug about it. Our Android 20 team will look into that bug. It'll be a high priority bug for them. And also go and meet the Ask the Experts, because there's some mobile people there who should be able to, at the very least, point you in the right direction about this behavior.
Okay, so would you say I should essentially make a few projects that kind of really show the issue that I'm talking about specifically, or something like that?
The smaller and more minimal the reproduction steps, for us, the easier it is. So one thing we do is when we get bugs in, so this is a pretty important piece of information, and there's a blog post about this as well if you look on our blog, but we rate the bugs that come in, and there's a few things we use to calculate this. It's how good are the reproduction steps? Has the user written any reproduction steps? Is there a crash log associated? Is there a reproduction project associated? How big is the reproduction project? And then we give the bugs that come in a score from between 0 to 5, where 0 is basically someone's just submitted a crash log, and 5, someone's written a description of how to reproduce the issue and submitted a bug project. And we use this because we get a large number of bugs coming in just because of crash issues and things like this, and we need to know which ones we're more likely to have success fixing, and we'll put time into those as opposed to some of the other bugs. That doesn't mean we don't look at the other bugs, but they generally go through a different system where we'll sort of collect crash reports and then figure out similar call stacks and crash situations. Yeah, so a small reproduction project always helps because it allows a developer just to double-click, open it up, reproduce the issue, and it means that we know we're in exactly the same situation you had when it's your project. If we try and reproduce the project ourselves, we may do it slightly differently and not actually be able to reproduce the issue. But even if you can't make a project, still report a bug, but it's always better.
Awesome, thank you.
No troubles.
So yeah, I've been doing a lot of Unity different project, and I've been struggling to find a good saving system in Unity. I mean, I've done a lot of player preference, but sometimes when the game is getting bigger and bigger, it's a lot more complicated. And then you have also the serialization in C#, but then you didn't support the mono behavior object as well as scriptable object. So I'm looking forward for a new saving system that is made from Unity.
Okay, and this is for when you're in your game, right? Not in the editor.
Yeah.
So there's a number of solutions on the asset store. We don't provide one out of the box for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones is that there are many ways that people want to save a game, depending on the type of game and the type of data that needs to be stored and how that data wants to be applied when they load the game. So some games, what they do is they apply a fixed state when they load the game, and it has all the object data. Other games apply deltas, and their save system is basically a set of deltas that get applied to the world. And we try to be very agnostic in the way we approach these parts of the engine. So we don't necessarily have the best way to write a save system out of the box. I don't know what ones exist on the asset store. I know there is some, but that's probably the best place to look. And they're generally written on top of Unity's existing serialization system. Does anyone know any off the top of their head?
No, I was just going to say a similar thing to you in the sense that it's one of those things that we haven't done because the approach differs so much for different people's games. But I do tend to think that we probably need a better generic solution than pref. So, and it's something that we do get asked a lot. You know, this isn't just unique to you. So yeah.
Yeah. So I can take that feedback back to the core group that works on the serialization systems and say we probably should have some form of save system in Unity.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean it's good to have a serialization that is support mono behavior object.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. I've got two questions. The first one is we've seen with the Cinemachine dolly track that you have like sophisticated spline tool support, and like for maybe I think in the particle system there are like min-max animation curves and stuff like that. It would be really useful to get these base editor tools to use for other things. Like the spline tool would be useful many times for level design and stuff like that. The min-max animation is useful everywhere.
We actually have someone who can speak about that, which is good.
The min-max and the min-max gradients currently work and expose them as sort of generic classes, so you can put them in your script and get the inspector and be serialized. So we are working on that. And spline, I believe the 2D team are working on generic spline system. We're hoping to use March for user scripts. Right next to the early days. Maybe they know a bit more about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so there's a couple of things here. So the first thing you brought up was Cinemachine. The dolly track is actually something that I used just because we don't have a spline tool. So we saw Joachim's demo with the spaceships flying around and all the Boyd simulation. I'd used the dolly track to animate the spaceships around, because basically the way the dolly track works is it's got a series of points, and you get path data as a float back. So you go from 0 to 1 over that, and the more points you add, it just kind of expands. So you can animate around that spline. It's not intended for that, so it was kind of painful to do that animation, and I had to child things to do rotation and stuff and make it a lot more easier. So it's not really a spline solution, but the reason that Adam's done that is because that dollying is what the camera system needed. Now, we do have people working on a generic spline solution, as Carl points out, and the thing is, it's more likely that you'll see people using the dolly system like I did, just before that system ships, because it's out there now and it works. But we're all really aware that we need a proper spline solution for various reasons, particles, animation, all kinds of things. So yeah, that's in the works. But in the meantime, like, the dolly track does work for some things, but I imagine there's probably much better tools on the store for pure spline work. I don't know if anyone knows any of those, but...
I also agree that we need a generic spline tool. I've been complaining before I joined Unity and at Unity.
How many years ago was that?
Over 4 years. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. There's so many different uses that a generic spline tool could use, and when you use spline tool and many other things, you realize how needed it is. But as Will said, the dolly path is actually very useful in actually using as kind of a current download today type spline tool. But on the asset store, there's a whole variety, some paid, some free, so they tend to vary. This is why it's kind of, I get asked a lot, what's the best thing on the asset store to do X? And it's tricky because A, we have so many, B, it's very difficult to know all of them inside out, back to front, and C, I don't want to make a suggestion of one thing and then I get a really angry phone call at 2 a.m. 6 months later saying, you know, oh, you recommended this thing. So the good handy thing is that there's often, let's say, Save Solution or Spline Tool, there's free versions and paid versions on the asset store, so you can at least try them out before you kind of commit to one. So I only ever recommend an asset store package if I've actually used it myself and it's been totally fine and I know it all works. But we often find that a lot of the best asset store packages often have contact links and information, so you can always email the developers and they'll respond back, like Behave by Emil, like he'll always respond to support things, so you can always ask them. So in terms of Spline Tool, I agree, but the dolly path is kind of our current built-in solution for the time being, and it totally works, as Will said, like with the ships flying around. But yeah, on the asset store, there's lots of different solutions. Actually, a lot of studios I meet will just build their own solutions. So it's actually more often than not, so many companies I visit will just build their own tools because we don't have them, and then they'll just port all their stuff over when we release it. And I've lost count of the number of companies I've met who have their own Unity feature development team who just build features either as alternatives or because they have very, very specific goals and needs. And I always ask them, why do you do this? And some just want flexibility, some want to squeeze every tiny little bit of performance, and some are like, well, we kind of like a challenge, so we decided to build our own equivalent of your system.
But some people also like a workflow that they're used to from something else, so they tend to build tools that are more akin to, like they've got 10, 15 people from whatever competing product of which they don't exist. They might bring over those expertise by just tweaking our tools to work a bit more like that.
Yeah, and there's another side of this as well, which is it's very easy to write a super custom tool for your project if you know exactly what the constraints of your project are. And that tends to be one of the biggest challenges we have at Unity. It's writing tools that scale to the general project rather than the specific project.
And also things that don't have too many features that get in your way when you just want 2 things, maybe. But you had 2 questions, right? We've kind of gone off on your spline tool a little bit.
Sorry, one last thing. So we do actually release a lot of things. So for example, the shaders built into Unity, you can download and modify them, change them, and understand them. The studio I once visited were doing a very stylized game. Wasn't realistic, anything like that, stylized mobile game. They basically taken the standard shader UI and built their own version of it for their stylized game, but with all their slots for noise and all sorts of gradients and all sorts of things. So they basically took the standard shader and not hacked it, but like rebuilt it for their own specific purpose. And they did that all entirely without, messaging me once. But they have my phone number, so they could have called me. But
people can work without messaging you.
Pardon?
People can work on their projects without messaging you.
Yeah, the number of phone calls at 1 a.m. have definitely reduced over time, I've noticed, for many reasons.
So we're doing something right.
The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of people build entire features on top of Unity, like Shader Forge is made by one guy. I think, yeah, one go?
Yeah.
And then lots of people build entire features and systems and either sell them or they just have it very specific to their project. So another team were like, oh, we've built this spline tool for our game, and I always say, how applicable is it in other uses? And they're like, no, just this very specific game, you can use this spline tool. So that's great for them, but more generic ones a bit trickier to, I guess, make.
Thanks a lot for the information.
Question 2.
So the next question was, we can extend like property fields for drop-down values like enum fields, because we have to do that like when we have 100 enums for like animation states or something like that. The header for that when you drop down the list is very hard to use because it's like the whole screen and you can only use the up and down arrows. Sometimes you can press a letter key to get to the next thing, but when you start all your animation clips with an underscore or something like that, it just doesn't work. So we can extend that. We have used a search field for every enum property, so you can type in a search field and you get only the list that you need. But when using the animation window and you have a lot of animations, you get a drop-down list that's like 100 or 200 entries. You can't navigate this thing. And our animators get really mad with this. And we can't extend the animation window or change anything how it's displayed. So we would like to, get.
So this falls into a category of many things that are the reason that we're rewriting that underlying UI. There's a lot of things that people really need us to do that we often consider to be low-hanging fruit, like, oh, why can't we just X? And a lot of those things are true. We could just do a thing and do a short-term fix. But a lot of the things, like the Uber scrolling thing that you described, like all of these kind of things, like require certain changes in the UI that, when I say it out loud, sound like a really lame excuse. But for us to actually develop these things and make them a consistent set of tools kind of requires this new tech that we're building. So what you'll notice in Unity when you click around is that we don't have things like hover states. We don't have ways of expanding that works particularly well for certain types and for certain layouts. And all this kind of stuff drops into that category of it will be far better for us to implement a fix or implement a workflow for once we've finished rebuilding with UI elements, which is what's in the works at the moment. So I think what you'll see throughout 2018 is we'll slowly be going back to the kind of drawing board of how those originally workflows were put together. Like, how do you represent an enum? How do you drop things into an array and scale it without just making scroll bars? Just dumb stuff like that I think we're bound to revisit as a result of having like a new palette of tools for our editor team to work with. So that's kind of the real answer. I know that's not that satisfying. Like, hey, we're working on that. It'll be out next week. But we're working on things to make everything better, and that definitely falls into that category. Is that accurate, Shawn?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about with the design principles, right? We have a lot of edge cases and things that have crept up in inconsistent ways, and to really sort of build systems going forward, we have to create consistent patterns. So when you have a drop-down that has 100 items, we probably shouldn't fill your entire screen top to bottom and then force you to keep scrolling past your screen. It should sort of be like, well, we'll cap it about 20 and then sort of let you fly out and find better ways.
Yeah, a lot of things that we think about are how many mouse miles do you actually have to do to perform any action. I actually think that Unity, people talk about Unity, oh, it's great because you can drag and drop things. I actually think that kind of sucks because it's often really awkward to drag and drop things over distance. And if you screw it up, it's really annoying. And especially like we're just adding cut and paste to the hierarchy. Like, we didn't have cut and paste for so long. And you have to, if you're an artist, if you're dragging something up a hierarchy of 200 objects, you have to get that sweet point where it starts scrolling back up the thing. Ridiculous. So like stuff like that, it's like we try and emphasize those kind of dumb problems.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a question back to you. So with mega scroll list of all the elements and properties, what way would you like it to, for you, filtering it, do you want it in specific properties or alphabetical, or for you to be able to set what properties are exposed? Because we have that big mega list. It just, some people prefer some ways and prefer others. I'm curious what you would prefer.
The easiest thing for us would probably just be a search field. So you
Okay.
can type a few letters or like
Yeah.
a prefix or something like that, and then you
Yeah.
get the things that you need, because we have a strong naming convention, so everything is named correctly, and then you can easily search for it. And like, if you have a list of 100 or 200 things, you type in a prefix, and you get maybe a list of 20, and then you can easily select
Yeah.
what you need.
I know exactly what you mean when you link it to like an animator, and it's just 600 things. You just scroll. Okay, that's cool.
Cool.
You write it down.
Thanks.
Cool, thank you.
Assigned to me already.
Hey,
Hey.
I have a question about scene management. I do a lot of dynamic stuff at runtime, but it's quite difficult to query information about scenes before they're loaded. So if you can just
Can you speak a little bit closer?
Thank you. Even things like scene names, it's difficult to find them out, like which scenes are in your build at runtime. And I'd also like to be able to get more information about them, attach other kind of bits of data to the scenes and query that. Do you know if there's a way of already doing that I don't know about, or if it's possible?
So what you probably want to do is go to the Ask the Experts panel right after this and ask for Richard Fine. He knows a lot about the build process and all the things get included and how to reference them in the correct way.
Yeah,
So-
we do have a few problems with like accessing between like loaded scenes at the moment. Like I think that's been a general problem with the approach to multi-scene editing that we put together, and it's currently being revised as well. So we're working on like we have a bunch of people working on scene management, don't we? So we know that it's like the first implementation, which was like I think 5.1 or 5.2, where you had multi-scene, wasn't what we wanted it to be. So it's kind of being reworked on, and that's being done by the same kind of group that does things like asset bundles and stuff like that. So they're thinking about that holistic view of where are things stored, how do they talk to each other, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like Tim says, it's definitely worth going and talking to Richard at Ask the Experts, because he literally knows everything.
Yeah,
I think he's doing a talk later. Is that what you're going to say?
He's doing a talk on serialization. He's doing a talk on serialization later. But before that and after that, I think he'll be to Ask the Experts, and he knows all about this stuff, and he'll be able to answer the very specific questions you have.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm a bit small, but there we go. A question more related to the product and support side of things. What I've noticed myself, and when I'm talking to some other developers around me as well, when you're in a bigger project, I mean, I'm in a 3-year project, it's a premium console title, it's very dangerous for us to switch to beta and experimental versions, right? We did this before, and when you do, you get into these features that not a lot of people have seen yet, and you can be the first one to bump into issues, and then you have to go back to an old version, and it's all a hassle, and it's quite dangerous. But what I'm wondering, like on your side, do you notice that the feedback you get on the experimental versions don't go that deep because of this reason? Because there's a lot of developers who are scared to go into, beta versions without being a stable one. So they're not touching on everything that version has to offer. So then you release it as a stable, and then everyone, for the first time, sees these deeper things because it's bigger projects touching it.
Yeah. So this is a big problem that we have with experimental builds, with alpha, beta, all of those things, and it's always been the same thing. People will dive into an experimental build because they want to try out that feature, not because they want to see how that feature works with all the other features in their game, because it's either too much of a time commitment, it's too risky, all of these things. And that's part why, something Tim mentioned earlier, this idea of what we call shrinking the core. So the core of Unity being like that kind of low-level stuff, and then layers above that being packages. So more and more what you'll see is that Unity is putting out features as packages.
Like the post-processing, right? That's what you mean.
Exactly, like post-processing, etc. Now, the problem with that is that things begin to feel fragmented. So one of the challenges that we have, like over the next kind of year or two, is how do we make all of those features feel like just normal features like they do today? You go to a menu, you get a thing, without saying, I'm going to go to a store and find a thing. Like we hate how it is at the moment. Like we don't like the fact that we have to put post-processing on GitHub and on the asset store and all these kind of things.
Random forum posts.
Yeah, random forum posts.
Yes, that's a good point actually. Like the post-processing stack was one that the experimental version we actually tried because it was, it's an easy add-on. You try it and then we update it. But then all these other devs around us didn't even know it was
like the new Unity post-processing stack. So that's, I guess that's important.
So this is it. It seems unofficial as well.
Yeah, so the plan here is, so we're waiting on the package manager project that Joachim mentioned yesterday. And what this provides is a seamless way for us to integrate these modules and packages we write from GitHub into Unity. So when you create a new project, you'll basically be given a menu that says which one of these things do you want, and there'll be all of the approved Unity packages in the list. And then when we update or push a version update onto GitHub, it'll say, hey, a new version's available, do you want to update it for your specific project? So these packages will be versioned based on which project they're in and everything, so you have a known state in your project.
And there's a bunch of different benefits to this. So there's a benefit to us, like Tim said, because we can push out updates much quicker and fix things far more easily. But there's also like other benefits. So for example, if you use an asset store package today, it goes into your assets, litters your project, might be in a folder locations, you can't uninstall it. It's difficult to work with. Now, with package management, what we're doing is effectively giving you a layer alongside assets where something's just referenced inside a package instead of being expanded and littered in inside your work. So that's far more easier to upgrade. You can uninstall it straight away. And you can, as we've said, you can kind of version that thing and say, well, we tried this thing. We just roll back one file. We'll use the previous version. It's fine. But that kind of package manager work is something that we need to do to keep everything consistent, because we can't just implement something that's just an API. It's kind of like saying, we made you a particle system. Here's a code editor to work with it. No one's going to use it. And it's going to be bad for adoption, bad for the store, and bad for the community. So it's going to be a kind of a weird transitional period, but you'll see that kind of general shrinking down of what are core features being delivered as the 2017.3 is out and it's got this in it, as opposed to just, and there's updates to all of these things every few weeks. That's going to just keep getting better as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd also say, to bring it back to the original question, is it depends on depends on who is testing out these new features. We have some companies that are early in development on a project, and they'll grab these new features from the alpha and beta, and they'll be like, this is fantastic, we're going to build our game around this. But then there'll be other groups that are later in production that'll be like, we're not upgrading, we're going to stay on this version, we're going to ship on this version, and maybe after we've done the third patch, we'll try and upgrade. That's a good strategy in terms of risk aversion. And in the process we have with our releases now, where we have a supported patch released version for a fairly long tail, it's kind of nice because you can have a stable version from a year ago that we're still patching, but you can also have a version that has all the new features that are experimental and maybe have a few kinks to be worked out of them still.
And I was just going to say, outside of the technical scope, one of the other things that you'll notice is the design team sort of being more forthcoming in stuff that's maybe just in the ideation phase. So posting forums and saying, look, we're kind of thinking about this. We did it with the, the light modes. Yep. We had wireframes, we had walkthroughs, we had prototypes up on the forums for people to comment on, because a lot of people couldn't move their projects to the experimental or to the preview builds because it would basically trigger rebaking of all the light maps. And so it was like, okay, let's walk you through the interface and the changes so that it's a low risk. You get a say in it without having to commit to those things.
So every single time I visit Studio, I always ask, what version is your project currently on? So just to get context, we're still on 4.6, 5.1, 5.2, and then you get a bit more of an idea. And I always get the question, should we upgrade to this specific build? And it could either be a patch release, it could be the latest build, it could be experimental, alpha, beta, anything in the spectrum. And my question is always, what point are you at in your project? Because some people are a lot more rogue and will upgrade to every single beta as soon as it comes out. But that could be a team of, say, 3 people, and they're a little more, a little more wild. Or when it's a team of, say, 300, they'll probably lock into a release for years, which is very clever. And then they'll upgrade the project after they've shipped it, or they want to delay a bit, or they specifically need a feature. We cannot ship our game without X. Or we don't have the time to build X in this current version, and then we'll upgrade it later on.
We've been in the position where we could, there are periods in your project where you can just upgrade to a new version, and because you're not building anything, you're just working on it. Right now is one of those times, so that's easy to do. And then roughly around builds, we stop upgrading, we lock it in, right? It's just that, and I think the package is solved. It's just that it's a shame that we can't try part of something if that's stable, you know, because then the whole project becomes unstable. That's the only
Hopefully we can get there with packages so that you can have these new things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I always say either wait until your game shipped and then try going to an experimental thing with it. You know, when you're it's shipped and then you're doing maintenance, because then they can try upgrading and let us know. And that's actually pointed out a lot of flaws that I've then forwarded on, because it's often a big shipped thing. Or sometimes then teams that go off and then they start prototyping and experimenting with their next thing. They're thinking, oh, we're probably going to be working 2 years on this, so we want to lock into a build in a year's time. Let's call up Andy and get him to come tell us what's coming out in 3 versions away, so we can at least not spend 6 months building the same thing that Unity will eventually release. Someone came up to me at the demo booth today saying, I went to the NavMesh talk and I hate Unity. And I was like, why? And he said, I just spent 6 months building my own runtime NavMesh generation thing, and then I saw that you've done this with a button click, and I love you but hate you, because...
yeah, we're just done with our sequencer, so I know the feeling.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about this. You were like, oh, we created a whole cutscene thing, and then we saw timeline, and we're like, great. Which is why we kind of have the roadmap, and why, like Shawn said, we're kind of opening that bubble, earlier, so at least people can either prepare for the future or...
Yeah, but I mean, just to be clear, like when we have the roadmap, it's very sort of aspirational on what we'd like to do. And so I always say that if something doesn't exist and you need it, it's better to write it than wait. Yeah, because then you remove the risk, or mitigate the risk at least.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah.
He's back.
So that's C.
He's doing a whole list in that time. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, something like that. About exposing stuff in the expector. What about exposing properties? Say, or link fields to properties.
So you mean like the C# properties? Yeah. We don't do that currently because it doesn't play very nicely with our serialization system. I know there's an asset store package that's free, I believe, that you can do this with. I can't remember its name off the top of my head. It's something we'd like to do. It's one of those things that Will kind of talked about before, like a low-hanging fruit that would make everyone's life easier, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so we have 1 minute 45 left. Did you want to just change slides so that people can contact us? But feel free to ask your last 8 questions.
Okay, and what about exposing static fields? I know that you can use singletons instead, but it's also a feature that is useful.
So we don't so static fields in Unity can't get exposed because they don't live on an instance, and the inspector shows instance data.
You can show them on every instance, let's say, for example.
Pardon?
You can show them on
We could show them on every instance, but you can write a custom inspector to show that. It's not something we wish to do by default.
Okay, next. I've heard in the Unity Connect event thingy that they've added version control.
You mean collaborate?
Yeah, yeah, I know what it was. They added the option to do versions in Unity, version controls for the project and stuff. Like,
Is there a question there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, is there the option? Have they added the option to do branches, like to clone the project? And we're gonna.
So that is something that we want to do eventually. But right now, the aim with Collaborate specifically is to be more for smaller teams and be more inclusive of artists and designers that are coming in and don't necessarily want to learn how to use Git and everything else. Don't necessarily want that.
Safety pin, like to have the option to clone the.
We want to move it that way eventually, but we're focused right now on perfecting what we have. So that is something that we want to make, but we want to make it inclusive and simplistic as well. And as far as versioning, it's more source control as opposed to versioning. So, but with commenting and stuff, hopefully that will be more flexible for.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that we need Collaborate to be a fully fledged tool, the same way that every other version control is. It's kind of a one thing at a time kind of thing, and yeah, we're aware that branching is obviously the next big thing, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we are actually out of time, I'm afraid, but Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks to the panel for being here as well.
Thank you. Take it back.
And do hit us up. We're always available. We're always listening. Call Andy at 2 a.m.